All right, let's cut to the chase. We've all been there. Someone apologizes, but you can't shake the feeling that it's just a way to get out of trouble, not actually make things right. Ever had one of those apologies that didn't sit well with you, where it felt more like a manipulation tactic than genuine remorse? Yeah, that's what we're talking about today. Not all apologies are real. Some are just clever ways to avoid accountability or shift blame. But a Stoic doesn't fall for that. They look beyond the words and pay attention to the actions. In this video, I'm breaking down 7 fake apologies that sound convincing but aren't worth your time. So, if you've ever been on the receiving end of a fake apology and walked away feeling more frustrated than healed, this video's for you. By the end of this, you'll know how to spot insincere remorse from a mile away. Let's dive in. Number 1. The blame-shifting apology. Let's talk about one of the most manipulative forms of an apology, the blame-shifting apology. This is the apology that sounds like this. I'm sorry, but if you hadn't reacted like that. Or, I'm sorry, but you made me do it. On the surface, it might seem like they're taking responsibility for their actions, but in reality, they're not owning up to anything. Instead, they're shifting the blame onto you, making your actions the reason for their poor behavior. Here's the truth. They are not taking responsibility. They are making you the guilty one. This is a classic manipulation tactic. Rather than acknowledging that their actions caused harm, they make you question your own reaction, your own feelings. They make you feel as though your response was overblown, or that you somehow forced them to act in a way that hurt you. But a real apology doesn't come with conditions or blame. A real apology is clear, direct, and free of excuses. It's about taking full responsibility for the actions that caused harm, without any buts or justifications. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Epictetus said, "A man of honor seeks to correct his errors, not justify them." In other words, when you've made a mistake, your first job is to acknowledge it and correct it, not to look for someone else to blame. A person who is truly sorry doesn't try to deflect their responsibility onto others. They face their actions head-on, learn from them, and make amends. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Jessica, had a friend who constantly used the blame-shifting apology. Whenever Jessica would call her out for something that hurt her, the friend would immediately start with, "I'm sorry, but if you hadn't reacted that way, maybe I wouldn't have said that." Instead of acknowledging the harm caused, this friend turned the situation around and made Jessica feel like she was overreacting. It wasn't until Jessica recognized this pattern that she realized this wasn't an apology, this was a way of avoiding accountability. The sorry wasn't for what had been done, it was for how Jessica reacted. So how do you handle this type of apology? First, recognize it for what it is. When someone shifts the blame, they're not actually apologizing, they're manipulating the situation. Second, don't accept it. A real apology doesn't come with conditions or excuses. If they're blaming you, it's not an apology. It's an attempt to avoid responsibility. And finally, hold them accountable. True growth comes from acknowledging your mistakes and learning from them, not from justifying them. At the end of the day, a real apology isn't about making excuses or shifting blame. It's about owning your actions and striving to do better. If someone is apologizing but still making you the problem, it's time to recognize that it's not a genuine apology, it's a manipulation tactic. You deserve more than empty words. You deserve an apology that truly takes responsibility. Number 2, the "I'm sorry you feel that way" apology. Let's dive into one of the most dismissive forms of an apology, the "I'm sorry you feel that way" apology. You've probably heard it before. "I'm sorry you're upset." On the surface, it might sound like they're apologizing, But the underlying message is far from a true acknowledgement of their actions. They're not saying, "I'm sorry for what I did," or "I see how my actions hurt you." Instead, they're shifting the blame to you for your feelings, making it seem like your emotional reaction is the problem, not their behavior. Here's the truth. This is not an apology. It's a way to dismiss your feelings and deflect responsibility. When someone says, "I'm sorry you feel that way," they're essentially telling you that your emotions are the issue. They're not taking responsibility for what they've done. They're just acknowledging that you've reacted to their actions. This kind of apology is manipulative because it undermines your right to feel hurt while avoiding any accountability for the action that caused the harm. Instead of acknowledging how their behavior impacted you, they focus on how you reacted to it, making you feel like you're the one who overreacted. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Marcus Aurelius said, "Take responsibility for your actions, not for how others perceive them." In other words, an apology isn't about managing how someone else feels. It's about owning your own actions. A true apology takes responsibility for the behavior that caused harm and doesn't attempt to control or manipulate the emotional response of the other person. The Stoic approach emphasizes that when you hurt someone, you don't get to dictate how they should feel about it. What matters is acknowledging the mistake, owning it, and showing genuine remorse. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him Mark, had a colleague who would always use this type of apology. Whenever Mark pointed out that something his colleague did upset him, the colleague would say, "I'm sorry you feel that way," as if Mark's feelings were the problem. Over time, Mark realized that this wasn't about fixing the issue. It was about deflecting responsibility. His colleague never truly acknowledged the mistake. They just dismissed Mark's feelings, which only deepened the frustration. The apology was a way to make Mark feel like he was in the wrong for feeling upset, rather than dealing with the real issue at hand. So how do you handle this type of apology? First, recognize that it's not a genuine apology. If someone is only addressing your feelings and not their actions, they are not taking responsibility. Second, do not let them minimize your emotions. Your feelings are valid, and you don't need permission to feel hurt. And finally, expect accountability. A real apology involves acknowledging the impact of their actions and taking responsibility, not just sweeping it under the rug by pointing to how you reacted. At the end of the day, a true apology isn't about deflecting blame. It's about acknowledging the harm done and taking responsibility for your actions. Don't accept an apology that tries to minimize or dismiss your feelings. A genuine apology addresses the cause of the hurt, not just the emotional reaction to it. Number 3, the fine "I said sorry" apology. Let's talk about one of the most frustrating and insincere apologies, the fine "I said sorry" apology. This is the kind of apology you get when someone says, "Okay, I said sorry, can we move on now?" It's quick, it's dismissive, and it feels like they're only apologizing because they want you to stop talking about the issue, not because they truly regret their actions. They don't take the time to reflect on what they did. They just want to end the conversation and move on, hoping that saying the words, "I'm sorry," will be enough to make it all go away. Here's the truth. They don't mean it. They just want you to stop talking about it. This is a classic example of a forced apology. When someone apologizes out of obligation instead of genuine remorse, it has no value. They're not acknowledging the harm they've caused. They're just offering a superficial apology to get you off their back. A real apology requires time, reflection, and the willingness to make things right. It's not about rushing through the words so that you'll stop confronting them. It's about sincerely taking responsibility and showing through action that they understand the hurt they've caused. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Marcus Aurelius said, Words without actions are empty. Let deeds reveal true intent. In other words, a true apology isn't just about saying the right words. It's about showing through actions that you genuinely regret your behavior and want to make amends. Apologies that are quickly brushed off and followed by a plea to move on don't reflect any true understanding or remorse. Real change comes through action, not just words. Let me share a story. A guy I know, let's call him Tom, had a friend who often used this type of apology. Whenever Tom would express how something the friend did hurt him, the friend would say, "Okay, I said sorry. Can we move on now?" There was no real emotion behind the apology, just a quick dismissal of Tom's feelings. The friend wasn't interested in understanding why Tom was hurt or what led to the issue. They just wanted the conversation to end, hoping the apology would be enough to close the chapter. Over time, Tom realized that these forced apologies weren't fixing anything. They were just putting a band-aid on a wound that needed real attention. So how do you handle the "fine, I said sorry" apology? First, recognize it for what it is. If someone is rushing you to move on without genuinely reflecting on their actions, their apology lacks sincerity. Second, don't accept it as closure. True remorse involves more than just saying the words. It's about showing through action that they understand the harm they caused. And finally, hold them accountable. If they don't want to put in the effort to make things right, don't waste your time waiting for a real apology. At the end of the day, a real apology isn't about getting through the words. It's about the intent behind them. Forced apologies are empty and carry no weight. True apologies are shown through actions, and those actions prove that the person is willing to make things right, not just move on. Number 4, the "if I did anything wrong" apology. Let's dive into one of the most passive and frustrating types of apologies, the "if I did anything wrong" apology. You've probably heard it before. "If I did anything wrong, I apologize." At first glance, it may seem like they're acknowledging their mistake. But when you look closer, you realize they're not really taking responsibility. By saying "if," they're distancing themselves from the wrongdoing and leaving the door open for doubt. It's a way of apologizing without actually admitting any fault. Here's the truth. By saying "if," they are refusing to admit any actual wrongdoing. This kind of apology is designed to avoid accountability. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry for what I did," they throw in a conditional phrase that casts doubt on the situation. It's as though they're trying to soften the blow by not fully acknowledging that they were wrong. But a real apology doesn't leave room for doubt. It doesn't dance around the issue. It's direct and takes ownership. A real apology owns the mistake, without excuses or conditions. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Epictetus said, "A wise man owns his faults, but a fool buries them in excuses." In other words, someone who is truly wise and humble will take responsibility for their actions, no matter how difficult it may be. They won't make excuses or try to deflect. They will face their faults head-on, learn from them, and make amends. A person who genuinely wants to improve doesn't hide behind conditional phrases like "if" or "maybe." They own their mistakes and work to fix them. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Lily, had a friend who often used this kind of apology. Whenever Lily would express how something her friend did upset her, the friend would say, "If I did anything wrong, I apologize." Lily would immediately notice the lack of commitment in the apology. It wasn't a real admission of fault. It was just a way to avoid taking full responsibility. Over time, Lily realized that her friend wasn't actually apologizing for the hurt they caused. They were just trying to smooth things over without facing the truth. So, how do you handle the "if I did anything wrong" apology? First, recognize it for what it is. An apology that starts with "if" is not an apology. It's a way to avoid accountability. Second, don't accept it as genuine. A real apology doesn't come with conditions or doubts. It's clear, direct, and acknowledges the wrong. And finally, don't let them off the hook. If someone can't admit to their mistakes, they're not offering a true apology. At the end of the day, a real apology requires taking full responsibility. Saying "if" only deflects accountability and creates confusion. True growth comes from owning your mistakes, not from burying them in excuses. Number 5. The repeat offender's apology. Let's talk about one of the most frustrating types of apologies, the repeat offender's apology. You've probably heard it before. "I promise it won't happen again." It might sound sincere at first, but when the same mistake keeps happening over and over again, the apology starts to lose its meaning. This person might say all the right things, but their actions tell a completely different story. They apologize, they promise change, but nothing ever actually improves. Here's the truth. Apologies mean nothing without change. If someone repeatedly apologizes for the same behavior without making any real effort to change, those words become empty. A promise to stop doing something is only meaningful if it's backed by consistent action. If they keep making the same mistake, they're not apologizing. They're simply telling you what you want to hear to avoid consequences. A real apology involves both words and actions. It's not just about promising change, it's about showing it through consistent behavior. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Epictetus said, "Character is revealed not by what is said, but by what is done repeatedly." In other words, true character isn't demonstrated by occasional promises or words, it's demonstrated by consistent actions over time. If someone repeatedly makes the same mistake, they're revealing more about their character than their words ever could. True growth is about learning from past mistakes and changing your behavior. If someone doesn't change their actions, their apology is just a way of maintaining the status quo. Let me share a story. A guy I know, let's call him Peter, had a friend who constantly apologized for the same behavior. Every time they made plans and cancelled at the last minute, they'd say, "I'm really sorry. I promise it won't happen again." But time and time again, the same thing happened. Plans were broken, promises were ignored, and Peter was left frustrated and disappointed. After a while, Peter realized that these apologies meant nothing. The words were empty because the behavior never changed. It became clear that his friend wasn't genuinely sorry. They were just repeating the same pattern without any real intention of changing. So how do you handle the repeat offender's apology? First, recognize that actions speak louder than words. If someone keeps apologizing for the same mistake without making any real effort to change, their words are meaningless. Second, stop accepting empty promises. If they keep saying, "It won't happen again," but it does, it's time to set boundaries. And finally, hold them accountable. Real change comes from consistent action, not repeated apologies. At the end of the day, words without action are empty. If someone keeps making the same mistake and offering the same apology, their words lose their power. True character is revealed by consistent behavior, not by hollow promises. Number 6. The performative apology. Let's talk about one of the most manipulative types of apologies, the performative apology. This is the type of apology that happens in public or in front of others, but the moment the audience is gone, the same harmful behavior continues behind closed doors. You've probably seen it. Someone apologizes in front of a crowd or posts an apology on social media, but when it's just the two of you, nothing has changed. They don't make the effort to genuinely heal the relationship. They just want to appear sorry for the sake of their image. Here's the truth. They are not sorry. They are just protecting their image. A performative apology isn't about genuine remorse or healing the wound they've caused. It's about saving face, gaining sympathy, or seeking validation. When someone apologizes publicly but continues the same behavior privately, it's clear that their apology is for show, not for substance. A real apology is about change, not applause. It's about taking responsibility, making amends, and showing genuine remorse, not about receiving attention or praise for doing the right thing. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Marcus Aurelius said, "A sincere man seeks forgiveness in private, not applause in public." In other words, if someone is truly sorry for their actions, they don't need the spotlight. They want to make things right in the quiet of the relationship, not for public approval. Real change happens in private, not in front of an audience. If their apology is only meant to look good to others, it's not sincere, it's a manipulation. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Rachel, had a colleague who used to make performative apologies. Whenever the team had a meeting, this colleague would apologize publicly for their mistakes. "I'm really sorry for causing this issue. I'll do better." But when the meeting ended, Rachel would see the same mistakes happen behind the scenes. They never took any real responsibility for their actions, and they continued the same behavior privately. Rachel realized that the apology wasn't about making amends, it was about protecting their public image. They didn't care about fixing the relationship, they cared about how they appeared to others. So how do you handle the performative apology? First, recognize it for what it is. If someone apologizes in public but doesn't change their behavior when the audience is gone, their apology is for show, not sincerity. Second, don't be impressed by public gestures. A real apology isn't meant to gain applause, it's meant to heal, and finally, demand real change. If someone isn't backing up their words with action, their apology means nothing. At the end of the day, a true apology isn't about getting applause, it's about doing the hard work in private. A performative apology is empty because it's driven by self-image, not genuine remorse. A sincere person apologizes to heal, not to gain applause. Number 7. The "it was just a joke" apology. Let's talk about one of the most frustrating and dismissive types of apologies, the "it was just a joke" apology. You've probably heard this one before. "Come on, it was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." They say these words in an attempt to brush off their behavior, implying that your feelings are overblown or unjustified. The problem? If something hurt you, it wasn't a joke. It was disrespect disguised as humor. A real apology doesn't minimize your feelings by turning them into something trivial. Here's the truth. They are using humor as a shield to avoid taking responsibility. When someone hurts you with a comment or behavior, and then tries to excuse it by calling it a joke, they are not apologizing. They're trying to invalidate your feelings. They want to make you feel like you're the one in the wrong for being upset, rather than acknowledging that their words or actions crossed a line. A real apology doesn't make light of the harm caused. It takes your feelings seriously and works toward making amends. This is where Stoic wisdom comes in. The Stoics teach us that wisdom is about recognizing and addressing harm, not disguising it under humor. Epictetus said, "The wise do not disguise harm as humor." When someone tries to laugh off their hurtful behavior, they are avoiding the discomfort of owning up to it. Real wisdom comes from acknowledging harm directly and with sincerity. Using humor to cover up hurtful actions only deepens the wound. It doesn't heal it. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him Alex, had a friend who often used humor to hide disrespectful comments. Whenever Alex called him out on something hurtful, the friend would say, "It was just a joke. Why are you so serious?" The friend was never truly sorry. He was just trying to deflect any accountability by turning the situation into a laughing matter. Alex realized that this wasn't a joke. It was a way to avoid responsibility and diminish his feelings. The apology wasn't about making things right. It was about trying to avoid the consequences of hurtful actions. So how do you handle the "it was just a joke" apology? First, don't allow them to minimize your feelings. If something hurt you, it wasn't a joke. It was disrespect, and you have every right to feel upset. Second, demand a real apology. A real apology takes responsibility without any conditions or excuses. And finally, set boundaries. If someone continues to disguise harm as humor, it's time to protect yourself and distance from that behavior. At the end of the day, disguising harm as humor is a tactic used to avoid accountability. If someone tries to excuse their actions by calling them a joke, don't let them off the hook. True maturity is recognizing when harm has been done and taking responsibility for it, without hiding behind humor.